olabilmesi için, olması için yola çıkan, bilgi çağında Türkiye'nin en ön saflarda yerini alabilmesi için çok samimi bir gayretle emek veren, bu gayeyle yol yürüyen ve bugün 30. yaşında olan Türkiye Bilişim Vakfı'nın doğum günü kutlu olsun. Hepiniz kutlama partisine de öğreniyoruz. Hoş geldiniz. Benim için çok büyük bir keyif burada olabilmek. Afşin Yurdakul, ben çok teşekkür ediyorum Türkiye Bilişim Vakfı'na, sevgili Faruk Eczacıbaşı'na, bütün ekibine ne emekle çalıştıklarını, bugünü hazırladıklarını da
Çok teşekkürler Avşin. Çok güzel sözlerin vardı. Sevgili dostlar, Türkiye Bilişim Vakfı 30 sene önce 2 tane paradigma arasında kuruldu. Endüstriyel dönem ve yapay zeka dönemi. Ben şimdi kısaca ilk kuruluş zamanlarına geri dönmek istiyorum. Çok fazla değil ama o dönemi hatırlayanlardan var aramızda. O zamanlar kısır koalisyonlar, futbol ve magazin üçgeni içinde haberler dışında pek fazla bir şey duyulmuyordu Türkiye'de. Fakat yeni bir şey çıkmıştı ortaya, yavaş yavaş yükseliyor. Türkiye'de katiyen konuşulmayan bir konu. Adına da internet diyorlardı. Aslında çok da fazla başlanmıştı demek yanlış olur. O tarihte küresel kullanıcıların sayısı 1995 yılında 39 milyonu bulmuştu. Yani dünya nüfusunun %7,5'u internete bağlıydı. Bugün bu oran %73, yani yaklaşık 6 milyar kişi. Biraz daha tarih bilgisi, TCP/IP'nin 89'da çıkmasının sonunda 90 yılında zaten 2,6 milyona erişilmişti. Ama Türkiye'nin internetle tanışması, daha doğrusu Türkiye'de faaliyetin başlaması 93 yılını buldu. Orta Doğu Üniversitesi'nin yaptığı uluslararası bağlantılarla gerçekleşti. 94 yılında da Superonline ve Evkolay'la tanıştık. 95 yılında geldiğimiz zaman da 30 binden daha az kullanıcı vardı Türkiye'de. İşte o 30 binden daha az sayıda birkaç arkadaş, ya bu biraz yani gerçekten bir kırılım yaratacak, çok önemli bir değişim dedi ve TBV'yi oluşturdu. Kurulduğumuz zaman hemen bize teknoloji gurusu damgası yapıştırdı. Evet, aramızda o dönem gurular vardı ama amacımız o değildi. Daha ilk yıllarda bile bana kişisel bilgisayarların performansları, içindeki teknik düzenekleri hemen sormaya başlamışlardı. Benim de
that looks like a mobile phone would be like a suitcase next to you, on the seat next to you in your car. I was hired into IBM, and I remember walking in the door. There was 200,000 people worldwide walking out the door because there was something called the PC. I mean, what was this? Who would think about using a PC? I mean, would you really carry around a device? What's the matter with a mainframe? So I could go on and on. But what that embodies is a cycle of innovation that has gone from we would start something 20.
I've been grappling with this question of tech for good for quite a long time, ever since I was in high school and thinking about what I wanted to study in college. I ultimately went to MIT to study engineering, then I worked in Silicon Valley. Now I'm a journalist and I have worked for publications like MIT Technology Review, the Wall Street Journal, and The Atlantic. And so today I want to kind of distill a lot of the lessons that I have learned through my time working both in Silicon Valley as well as reporting on it, and give you a bit of a taste of this book that I wrote, Empire of AI. So we're going to talk today about OpenAI and the AI industry, but I actually want to start in a place that you might not have expected, Nairobi, Kenya, to tell you the story of this man, Alex Cairo, who was 28 years old when I interviewed him 2 years ago. And in late 2021, Alex was working at a company called Sama when they offered him an opportunity to work on a brand new project. Sama is an outsourcing company. It's based in San Francisco. It connects tech companies in SF with overseas workers to help them with tasks that are essential to AI development. So if you take self-driving cars, in order for them to safely navigate on the road, of course, they have to be able to register other cars, lane markings, pedestrians, traffic lights, and then be programmed to react and respond in the right way. None of this happens through magic. It happens through workers like Alex, who are spending hours a day actually tracing the contours of different objects, like the cars, like the lane markings, and then annotating them accurately so that they can be used to train AI models, like a computer vision model, for ultimately helping the self-driving car navigate in the streets. For this new project, Alex didn't know who the client was, because in his line of work, tech companies don't actually reveal to the overseas workers who they are or what they are developing. But it turned out that the client was OpenAI. And at the time, OpenAI was in a very different place from where it is today. It actually did not have any commercial products. And up until then, it actually did not have any plans to build commercial products. But this was just beginning to change in 2021. They were already selling GPT-3 as a service directly to businesses. They wanted to expand their commercialization plan. And so they started thinking about what would happen if we put our technology, this large language model that can generate any kind of text, into the hands of millions of users. Well, they realized that they would need to shore up a fundamental problem with the technology, which is that they had scraped the internet in order to train their large language models. The internet also has a lot of dark corners, and there was a real possibility that putting this technology into the hands of these users would lead to some abusive, hateful, toxic speech from generating out of these model systems and the climate emergency that we have on hand. So there are people in the world who are actively competing with computers for life-sustaining resources. And over time, that could happen more and more. And in my book, I write about one of these communities in Montevideo, Uruguay, which I initially learned about from this article in The Guardian. Residents were facing such a historic drought during this time that the Montevideo government was literally mixing salt water into the public drinking water supply. And for people who were too poor to pay for bottled water, that is the water that they were drinking. And women were having higher rates of miscarriages. People with chronic illnesses were having inflamed symptoms. And it was in the middle of this huge public health emergency that Google proposed to build a data center in Montevideo and use the already scarce fresh water to cool the facility. So here's the extraordinary part. This scale is unnecessary. You don't actually need this degree of
etmek istiyorum. Bizimle bu panelde sabahki konuşmacılarımız var. Önce Digital Europe Genel Direktörü Cecilia Monfental. Kendisini sahneye davet ediyorum. Welcome back again. Thank you so much. Great to have you. Hemen hızla Karen Howe. Karen, come over join us. Ve ev sahibimiz, kendisine söyledim, önden bilgisi var. Bu panelde sevgili Faruk Eczacıbaşı'ndan oynamasını istediğim rol Philosopher King. Bizi böyle tartışmalara kapılırsak çekip çıkarıp büyük resme taşıyacak sevgili Faruk Eczacıbaşı. Peki. Şimdi biz hazırız. Bir sorumuz var size başlamadan önce. Kıymetli emektar rejiden rica edersem, evet. Böyle bir soruyla başlamak istiyoruz biz. Bu soru da artık çok soruyor, bu çağda sorusu bu filan gibi bir his geçiyorsa içinizden. Evet, şu an sorusu bu çünkü hepimiz daha bakalım fırsat arttı. 84 yer oldu fırsat, tehdit 21. Hadi bakalım, çok optimist bir topluluğuz bu sabah. Hayırlısı. Ben oy kullanmadım ama o yüzden şimdi böyle yansıyor. Neyse. Evet, başlayalım. Alright, so this is my mind struggling between two languages back and forth, but welcome again. Wonderful to have you in Istanbul, Karen, Cecilia. And thank you so much, Mr. Philosopher King Faruk Eczacıbaşı. I've already gave you that honorary title today.
This is an ever bigger compliment that I've got.
I'm so glad you did. Yeah. Well, long story short, there is much to unpack at this panel. It is now clear to me, after having heard your remarks, we know, yes, the world is shedding its old skin. We don't know what the new ground is about. We need a new paradigm, we need to name it. We don't really yet know what the new paradigm is about and what the name should be, or if we should name it something, anything. But I also know that this is quite a curious moment that we're standing in front of this distinguished guests, our guests today, which is the fact that it is a time for breathtaking innovation, but also breathtaking uncertainty, with everything from what we know about geopolitical order to the climate crisis, to how AI is reshaping our societies, the debates it has started all over the world. It's an interesting time, but I do know that may you live in interesting times is also not so much of a blessing, but is also a little bit of a curse. I think it is a Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. I think someone said that to us, to all of us, may you live in interesting times. Quite interesting times, I have to say. So that is what I want to start with, and unpack these ideas more. Karen, I had other questions for you, but having heard your presentation, I want to jump straight to the picture, the photo you shared with us, which is the tech giant. I call it, these companies are for limitless, uncurbed innovation, and others go so far as to call it the dawn of techno-fascism. Mm-hmm. I have a sense where you are regarding the two, but can you tell us more? What does that mean for the world today, that photo?
Yeah, I mean, I think even before Trump came into power, the U.S. government has not exactly done a very good job, even under like the Biden or Obama administrations, around regulating U.S. tech companies. But there is something new that's happening here, where there's a new alliance that's formed between an authoritarian in the government and techno-authoritarians in San Francisco. Before the US actually had this position, I would have argued that maybe the US government was more able to hold these tech companies accountable, and that these companies were not yet the most powerful entities in the world. Now I really do feel like they've emerged as the most powerful entities because they're backed by the other most powerful entity. And what I see, the reason why I think this alliance is happening is because there are there are overlapping interests between Silicon Valley and Washington. So Washington has also entered its empire phase. The Trump administration has used very explicit imperial language of late to state its vision of trying to rebuild the American empire, trying to export all American AI technologies all around the world and make everyone dependent on them. So they see Silicon Valley as assets of the state, and if they're able to control Silicon Valley and use it to ferry all of this hardware and software around the world, that this will somehow give the US continued sharp power in the global order. And Silicon Valley also sees the other side of this, which is they can use the US government to expand their own imperial ambitions, grow to a point where they become too big to fail all around the world, and not actually act in the US's interests, but in fact in their own interests. So each of them is trying to tenuously use the other to achieve their own aims, and this is why I find this a very dangerous alliance, because like regardless of how it plays out, neither of these groups are interested in preserving things like social cohesion, in global peace, in having agency for people around the world. Like they are ultimately there to accrue more and more power and be able to dictate how billions of people around the world live based on their own ideologies and ideas and visions of the future.
And so the fact that there is no checks and balances regarding their practice or what goes on inside these companies is something that I very clearly understand is a reason for concern for you and for millions of others around the world, frankly. But what do you think about the future of these companies then? Or do you think now it's time to have a debate about how to create those mechanisms of checks and balances, or just let it be, and because the political climate is also conducive to this kind of, I think, setup for these global tech companies, so we're just going to see where this goes. And is this a helpless moment in that case, or do you think there is something to be done, and that's what we should be focusing on?
There's so much to be done. Yeah, there's so much to be done. I do not in any way think that.
That's one of the crucial issues, because otherwise, I mean, everybody will go in their own way, which I hope doesn't end up with some mess.
What do you mean by mess? How messy is the mess?
Somehow, you innovate something. I mean, you get through those transformational innovations. You bring them to a market, and then because you don't have the right controlling gatekeepers, it gets out of hand, and then the catastrophe happens. I mean, it happened in the Second World. It happened during the World Wars, which is, and it even happened after the printing press that with the Protestantism, and then came to I mean, 100 years war between. I mean, it always happened. Mm-hmm. So we need to find some common in the peaceful times. Mm-hmm. We have to find a commonality in all of those standards, all the values.
Cecilia, you have a point to make.
I think you're totally right, and I think I said in my speech that industry is the bridge. So I'm talking, of course, about industry at large. Mm-hmm. And why am I saying that? So there are some very pragmatic problems that can be solved. You know, we actually don't need totally new regime of AI standards. So when the Commission started to discuss like new AI regulation, we sent them a list of 110 common standards that we use in AI across the globe. Industry use it as the baseline. Then we can discuss, do we need other things and how can we develop them together? So that's very pragmatic, very practical. But also, I mean, on transparency, what we saw that when we started discussing transparency rules, that the companies more or less already had implemented a lot of transparency, algorithm transparency rules, and they already had ideas on how to do it, and they were willing to share those ideas. So we actually thought it would be like more like a code of conduct, you know, okay, there might be special area that needs special attention. I'm not saying that, you know, towards consumer legislation and other things. But the industry at large, you know, there's a difference between business to consumer and business to business. The business to business, they already had a lot of the systems in place, and then there was maybe some checks and balances on the other side that we needed, instead of like taking the whole thing. So I think we can